They always say, family is where you feel most safe. Whoever said that never sat quietly in the next room while their own daughter-in-law whispered that they were dead weight. I stood in my son's kitchen that afternoon, folding towels so neatly you'd think I was pressing my regrets into those creases. I heard every word Clara spat under her breath. I heard my son's silence, too. Silence can be louder than a slap if you've lived long enough. You see, I wasn't always this invisible. There was a time my hands were strong enough to carry Michael on my hip, while I balanced a basket of laundry twice his weight. I survived nights without sleep, winters without heat, and years without rest, so he could grow up softer than I ever had a chance to be. He used to draw me pictures of the sun and stick figures with a macaroni glued on his hair. He once told his kindergarten teacher, "My mom is stronger than Superman." He was right. But time doesn't care how many stories your bones can tell. It robs you slowly. First your energy, then your usefulness, then if you're not careful, your dignity. I never expected Clara to love me. I didn't need her to, but I did hope she'd respect what these hands once built. She never did. That day, as I heard her telling my son he should say something about getting rid of me, something ancient in me rattled awake. A part of me that remembered how to survive. I placed the last folded towel on the pile, adjusted my apron, and stepped into the hallway. My voice didn't shake when I said it. "Dead weight, I heard you." Clara flinched like a child caught stealing candy. Michael opened his mouth, but the apology got stuck somewhere between his pride and his cowardice. "Mom, that's not what he started." "It is," I interrupted. "You just didn't think I'd be listening. You know what hurts more than being insulted? Realizing you've raised someone who stands beside the insult and says nothing." In that moment, I saw my son not as the little boy who once ran to me with scraped knees, but as a man who would let a woman half my age decide if his mother was worth the trouble. I went back into the kitchen. I finished folding. Each towel felt like a funeral for a piece of my patience. I set the neat stack down. My heartbeat was steady, but my hands trembled, not from fear, but from rage held too long under my tongue. That night at dinner, Clara couldn't stop her eyes from drilling holes into me. I did my best to keep my hands still, but arthritis has no manners. The bowl of soup slipped from my grip and splashed across her lap. Her hiss was more venomous than any snake I'd ever met. "Seriously, can you do anything right?" she snapped, dabbing her skirt with a napkin. She'd probably claim I ruined too. "I'm sorry," I murmured, reaching out to help. Before I could, her hand struck mine away hard. Then she struck my cheek. The sting was nothing compared to the way my son just sat there. He didn't say stop. He didn't even flinch. I swallowed my pride like poison. But a seed was planted that night, one I didn't yet know would grow into my salvation. They say a mother's love is unconditional, but they never tell you that sometimes it shouldn't be. That night, after Clara's slap, the dining table became a battlefield of unspoken truths. Michael kept his eyes on his plate like it could shield him from guilt. Clara scraped soup off her skirt, muttering curses but never an apology. I sat in silence, tasting the salt of my tears more than the food I'd cooked. I used to think silence was noble, a sign of patience, of being the bigger person. But silence can be complicity, too. My silence taught Clara I could be struck without protest. It taught Michael he could hide behind that same silence and pretend he was a good son. But I wasn't alone anymore, because just when my voice was buried, deepest life sent me my daughter back, Anne, my baby girl, who had vanished into a marriage I had prayed would love her more than I ever could. She had called me 3 days before her voice shredded with sobs I could barely piece together. "Mom, I'm done. I don't know how to leave him. I'm so tired. I'd whispered back all the strength I could. Come home, sweetheart. Come home. And now here she was standing in the doorway, that dinner suitcase still in hand, eyes wide at the mess she'd stepped into. She didn't need to ask what happened. My red cheek told the whole story. She dropped the suitcase, and in one breathless heartbeat, she crossed the floor. The slap she gave Clara echoed in my bones like a hymn. It wasn't violence. It was justice delayed, but delivered at the perfect moment. You ever touch my mother again? Anne snarled, her hand still trembling. And I swear, Clara, I'll break both your hands. Michael jumped up, stuttering nonsense about respect and boundaries. Anne turned to him so slowly it made him flinch. You let her hit Mom. You let her call Mom names. And you said nothing. You spineless, cowardly boy. Hearing my daughter say what I had swallowed for years was like exhaling after drowning. But Michael, oh Michael, his response showed me exactly what kind of man he had become. He spat words at Anne like a snake, cornered. She's dead weight. She just sits here doing nothing, just like you, a divorcee crawling back to Mommy. The second life gets hard. Anne recoiled as if he'd slapped her too. Her eyes flashed to me, ashamed, wounded, and yet so fiercely protective. In that moment, I realized something painful, but freeing. I could not save Michael from himself. I could not protect Anne from every cruel word. But I could save myself, maybe for the first time. I rose from my chair. My knees screamed their age, but my heart pumped young again. I stepped between my children, looked Anne in the eye and whispered, "You are not useless." Then I turned to Michael. My voice was softer than I expected, but stronger than it had ever been. You are not my son anymore." The hush that fell could have smothered the world. Clara's mouth hung open, a fish gasping for air. Michael's lips moved, but no sound came. I walked away from that dinner table with something more nourishing than any meal, my self-respect. And for the first time in decades, I could taste freedom, saltier than tears, but sweeter than any soup I'd ever spilled. After that night, nothing in the house was ever the same. It wasn't just the silence anymore. It was the way silence turned sharp, cutting through every room like a hidden knife. Clara avoided my eyes, but never my presence. She still expected dinner on the table, the laundry folded, the grandchildren bathed and sung to sleep. Michael busied himself with work, or at least that's what he said. In truth, he was hiding from me, from Anne, and mostly from the shame coiled around his neck like a leash. Anne stayed. She didn't pack her suitcase again. She turned my corner of the laundry room, my so-called guest room, into a small sanctuary. She hung an old curtain she found at a garage sale, tacked it up over the bare concrete wall to pretend it was a window. She brought me daisies in a chipped mug. It was pitiful, but it was love, and for a woman like me, it felt like oxygen after years of choking on other people's comfort. We barely spoke about what happened at the dinner table. Some truths don't need repeating. They echo on their own. Instead, we spoke about little things, how her new job search was going, what soup we should try next, whether I preferred jasmine tea or peppermint before bed. Small talk, big healing. But secrets have a way of growing mold in the dark. One afternoon, I overheard Clara on the phone, loud and careless, assuming I couldn't hear beyond my thin walls. She told her sister she wanted to convert my room into a playroom for the kids. She'll have to go. Eventually, she laughed. She's lucky we even let her stay this long. Those words hit harder than her slap, because they reminded me I had done this to myself. I taught them I could be used like an unpaid maid, a free babysitter, a house that paid its own mortgage while they reaped the warmth I'd built. And they were right about one thing: I had stayed too long. Not just in this house, but in the silence that turned my love into a transaction. I thought if I kept giving one day, they'd look at me and remember the mother who held their fevers through the night, who pawned her wedding ring to pay for Michael's college books, who covered for Anne when she sneaked out to kiss boys under the bleachers. But the cruel truth is, people who take rarely stop taking until you run out of things to give. That night, Anne found me sitting on my mattress. No bed frame, just blankets and an old pillow I'd brought from my old house. She sat next to me, her voice soft. "Mom, you don't have to stay here. You don't owe them this." I looked at her, my girl with bruises fading from her soul, but not yet her eyes. I said what I'd never dared say before: I don't want to stay. I just didn't know where else to go. Anne took my hand and squeezed it tight. "Then come with me. Leave it all. I'll figure it out. We'll figure it out together." For the first time since my husband's funeral, I felt like my heartbeat wasn't something I owed to anyone else. It was mine, and I wanted to protect it. I lay awake that night, listening to the old pipes groan through the walls. Every drip of the faucet felt like a reminder this house was never really mine anymore. It was my labor, my money, my sacrifice, but not my sanctuary. I'd given it up for Michael, and Michael had traded it for Clara's comfort and his own cowardice. Anne slept beside my makeshift bed that night, curled up on a thin blanket on the floor. She didn't trust leaving me alone in that space anymore. I watched her chest rise and fall, her hand still half touching my pillow, as if afraid I'd vanish if she let go. I thought about the version of myself who once believed being needed was the same as being loved. That foolish young wife who woke at 4 a.m. to make her husband's lunch, who put every extra dollar into a savings jar for her children's dreams. She never imagined she'd end up here treated like clutter in the back of a laundry room. But what did I do wrong? Nothing. That was the bitter miracle of it. I did what every mother is taught to do. Give. Forgive. Give more. Stay silent so your children can feel big in a world that keeps shrinking them down. And if they become selfish, we call it our failure. If they fail, we blame our love. It's poison that tastes like duty. I knew if I didn't leave soon, I'd die here. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but my spirit would rot one cruel comment at a time, until there was nothing left except an old woman rocking by the window everyone pretended not to see. So that night I made a promise, not to Michael, not to Anne, but to myself. I would stop paying for my own suffocation. And I meant it literally. At dawn, while Clara still snored, and Michael slept like a man with no conscience, I brewed a pot of strong tea. I dialed the bank, voice calm, despite my heartbeat, trying to punch through my ribs. "No, ma'am, you can't stop the mortgage payments unless the legal owner agrees. I am the payer. I'm stopping today. All bills, all notices, send them to Michael Harper and Clara Harper. I want a confirmation in my email. I am done." The woman on the other end paused, perhaps hearing the age in my voice, the iron in my tone. "Yes, ma'am. We can process that immediately." It was that simple. Years of sacrifice undone by a 5-minute phone call. And yet it was the hardest thing I'd ever done for myself. I hung up, exhaled, and opened my email. There it was, confirmation that the debt no longer tied me to this prison. I printed it, folded it neatly, and slid it into an envelope. It sat beside me all through breakfast. Clara yawned into her coffee. Michael scrolled through his phone, avoiding my eyes. Anne sat stiffly, her chin up, daring them to speak. I placed the envelope gently between Michael's fork and the salt shaker. "What's this?" Clara asked, her voice still thick with sleep. I looked her dead in the eyes. This is the last mortgage payment I will ever make. Michael's head snapped up. Mom, what? I called the bank this morning. From now on, you pay for this house yourselves. Consider it my last gift freedom. For me, and maybe for you too if you ever learn what to do with it. No one spoke. You could have heard the sun rise outside. Inside me, however, the sun had already risen. For the first time in years, it felt warm. I wish I could tell you that after that breakfast, they begged me to stay, that they fell to their knees, apologized for every cruel word and careless silence. But life isn't a movie. Sometimes people show you exactly who they are, and they stick to it. Clara's mouth moved, but no apology came out. She stammered something about unfair timing about the kids needing stability. Michael whispered my name, like a question he no longer deserved to ask. Anne sat at the end of the table, her fingers drumming softly against her mug. She didn't interfere. She didn't have to. My decision had already been made in the quiet hours before dawn. While the rest of the house dreamed, I was still theirs to use. After breakfast, I returned to my room. No, not my room. The storage corner they let me sleep in. I opened the battered suitcase I had brought with me when I sold my real home to buy this one for them. It was faded blue, with a broken zipper I'd mended a dozen times. Inside, I packed only what was mine, and truly mine alone. My mother's recipe box, a faded photograph of Michael and Anne as toddlers, my birth certificate, my pension papers. No heirlooms for them to fight over. No jewelry for them to pawn. Anne appeared at the door leaning on the frame like she had as a teenager when she wanted to confess she'd failed a test or had a crush on the neighbor's boy. She didn't say anything, just watched as I folded the last dress I owned that still made me feel pretty. Are you sure? She whispered. I zipped the suitcase closed. Yes, baby. I should have done it years ago. Her shoulders sank with relief and grief all at once. Then let me come with you. I smiled. Soon. But right now you need to handle your own escape. I need to take my first step alone. She didn't argue. Anne always understood silence better than anyone. I left the key to the house on the kitchen counter. I didn't leave a note. What could I say that I hadn't said with every meal I cooked, every diaper I changed, every dollar I spent, to keep this roof over heads that never bowed, to say thank you? I closed the door behind me. No slamming, no shouting, just the click of the lock and the freedom that waited on the other side. I didn't cry. Not when the bus pulled up at the end of the block. Not when I sat by the window and saw the porch where Michael once learned to ride a tricycle. Not when I passed the grocery store where I'd spent countless coupons so they could have brand name cereal instead of the generic one. Tears weren't needed anymore. They had already bought me enough disappointment. Now I was done paying. As the bus rattled out of town, I felt my heart exhale. It beat softer, freer. Somewhere deep in my chest, a door creaked open, one I thought had rusted shut decades ago. On the other side of that door was the life I still had left to live. Florida air tastes different when you're free. I stepped off that long bus ride with my suitcase bumping against my knee and my soul oddly weightless for the first time in decades. Anne was waiting by the station bench, her hair tied back face pale from too many sleepless nights and old bruises she hadn't yet named out loud. But her eyes, oh, her eyes were alive again. She didn't say, "Welcome back, Mom." She didn't have to. She just pulled me in and held me like she was hugging every broken piece I had left. Anne's apartment in Sarasota wasn't much: one bedroom, a squeaky sofa, and a tiny balcony that overlooked a half-empty parking lot. But to me, it was more palace than prison. There were no hushed insults behind thin walls. No footsteps sneaking up behind me to question how I folded towels or burned rice. Only the hum of traffic, the smell of ocean salt, and the gentle truth that nobody here called me dead weight. The first few days we moved around each other like ghosts, relearning how to share air. Anne flinched when her phone buzzed. She double-locked every door twice before bed. I pretended not to notice the nightmares that made her whisper apologies in her sleep. I knew what living with fear looked like. I had done it too, just in a quieter, more polite way. We didn't talk about Michael or Clara. We didn't need to. Instead, we talked about tomorrow. About the little online store Anne wanted to start selling handmade jewelry, thrifted clothes, a few paintings she hadn't touched in years because her husband told her art didn't pay bills. I found a local church that ran a free community kitchen. They let me bake a few dozen muffins for the elderly who came for lunch. The first time someone complimented my banana bread, I almost cried over the mixing bowl. I had forgotten my hands could make things that brought people joy instead of judgment. Anne called our new home the Haven. Sometimes I caught her whispering it like a prayer when she thought I was asleep. Our haven. Our haven. Every morning she'd wake first brew cheap coffee and set a cup by my bed. I'd pretend I was still dozing just to listen to her move around barefoot, gentle alive. She was breathing for herself now, not holding her breath for a man who controlled the air. One night, as we ate rice and steamed fish on the floor because we didn't have a dining table yet, Anne reached across and squeezed my hand. "Mom," she said, voice cracking, "you saved me." I squeezed back. "No, baby. We saved each other. Because sometimes freedom doesn't come in a grand escape. Sometimes it comes in small moments, one muffin, one laugh, one safe breath at a time." There's a truth old women carry in their bones. You don't heal by forgetting. You heal by remembering differently. In Anne's little apartment, I began to remember myself not as a burden, but as a woman who had survived things no child of mine would ever fully understand. Between the baking trays and thrift store paintbrushes, I unearthed pieces of my own stories I'd buried under diapers and mortgage papers for 40 years. On quiet afternoons, Anne and I would sit on the floor by the open balcony door. She'd sort beads for her jewelry shop, while I told her things I'd never dared speak when her father was alive. How I once dreamed of opening a tiny bakery in Savannah. How I used to sing in the church choir until my mother-in-law mocked my voice so harshly I believed her. How sometimes, when Michael was little, I would stand over his crib and whisper, "Please grow up kinder than your father." Anne would listen, eyes wide, fingers, still threading beads into bracelets we'd later sell online. Sometimes she'd smile. Sometimes she'd cry. But always she'd look at me like I was someone worth listening to, not just someone to feed and fold around. One day she asked, "Do you think there are other women like us?" I laughed softly. "There are millions, baby. Millions of mothers and daughters hiding bruises, some on their skin, some on their hearts. Most never leave. Some never even whisper the truth out loud." Anne's eyes lit up with an idea only youth can carry so fearlessly. Then we should tell their stories too, not just ours. And so on a laptop older than both of us wanted to admit we started a blog. Anne typed my words as I spoke. I told stories of Joyce, the neighbor who baked pies every Sunday for grandkids who never visited. Of Martha, who raised 5 kids on pennies, but died alone in a county hospital. Of myself, a woman who folded silence so many times it looked like obedience. We didn't have a plan. We didn't need one. Our first post had 3 readers, then 10, then 50. Women left comments. "This is my mother. This is me. Thank you for saying it out loud." Sometimes late at night, Anne would read the comments back to me. I'd hold my mug of tea and whisper into the steam, "You are not dead weight. You are not alone." Not just to them, to myself, too. We didn't make money from it, but it made something better. It made meaning. And for a woman who spent her life being the background, that was enough to feel like the main story at last. Our blog grew slowly but surely. Women from all over left comments. Grandmothers in Ohio, single mothers in Manila, widows in small towns whose children never called back. They wrote to us about kitchen fights and secret bruises about sacrifices swallowed whole and thank yous that never came. Anne printed some letters and taped them to our fridge right next to the grocery list, and a crooked photo of us eating mangoes on the balcony. She said seeing those words every morning reminded her that we weren't alone anymore, that what we survived had meaning, because someone else needed to hear it. One morning, while Anne was out delivering an order for our tiny online shop, a new letter arrived in our blog inbox. This one made me stop mid-stir as I mixed batter for a neighbor's muffins. It was from a little girl named Lily. Dear Grandma and Anne Mom, reads your stories out loud when she thinks I'm sleeping. But I listen. I want you to know I drew you a picture. It's you and your daughter, and me and my mom all holding hands. I hope you're not sad anymore. Love, Lily, age 7. I sat down at our wobbly kitchen table batter, dripping from my wooden spoon onto the floor. I hadn't felt tears like that in years. Tears not born of regret, but of a quiet, simple grace. When Anne came home, I showed her the email. She read it out loud, her voice trembling by the last line. Then she sat beside me and whispered, Mom, do you think Lily's mom is okay? I answered honestly. She's better today because she read words that told her she could be. We printed Lily's drawing too. Crayons and shaky handwriting. 4 stick figures, one with gray hair me. One with a ponytail Anne. 2 smaller ones holding hands with us. Underneath in crooked letters, family means we don't hurt each other. That night, I wrote back. My hands shook because age does that to you, but also because I wanted every word to matter. Dear Lily, I typed slowly, your picture is on our fridge now. I'm not sad anymore because I know brave girls like you will grow up and make the world better. Tell your mom she's not alone either. Love, Grandma. Anne hit send for me. Then she leaned against my shoulder and said softly, You know, Mom, you really are the grandma of a lot more people now. She wasn't wrong. I had grandchildren by blood one day. Maybe they'd remember the cookies I used to bake. But now I had granddaughters and grandsons in every corner of the world. Little strangers who needed a voice telling them they mattered, even when their own homes forgot to. We didn't rescue the world. We didn't become rich or famous. But every email, every comment, every hand-drawn family, those were stitches mending something broken in me that Michael's silence had ripped wide open. And for the first time, I was glad I hadn't stayed silent. I had become what I needed when I was their age, proof that old women still have new stories, and that sometimes they save more than themselves. Time passed in our little haven like warm honey, slow golden and sweet enough to forget winter ever existed. Anne and I fell into our rituals. I baked for neighbors who called me Miss May. She shipped bracelets and earrings wrapped in brown paper tied with twine. We didn't talk about Florida rent or the unpaid bills Michael and Clara must be choking on back home. We had our own air now, but the past has a way of finding you when it runs out of things to feed on. One rainy afternoon, Anne came in from the mailbox dripping on the kitchen floor, a look on her face I hadn't seen since the night her husband first hit her. Mom, she said quietly, it's him. Michael. She handed me an envelope. No return address, but I'd know that awkward too. Careful handwriting anywhere. I opened it with hands steadier than I expected. Inside was a letter that tried so hard not to beg, it practically screamed. Mom, I know you hate me. You were right to walk away. Clara and I made mistakes. Big ones. We're losing the house. We have nowhere to go. Please just call me. Please. I'm sorry. No excuses. No accusations. Just a few lines from a man stripped of his excuses by the same debt he once thanked me for covering. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same wobbly one where I'd read Lily's sweet note. Anne stood frozen behind me, waiting to see what I'd do. A year ago, I would have dialed him back before the ink dried. I would have handed over every dollar I had left. I would have told him, "It's okay, you're my son. It's my duty." But the woman sitting in that squeaky chair wasn't the ghost I used to be. Anne broke the silence first. "Mom." I folded the letter once, then twice. My fingers no longer trembled. Block his number. Her eyebrows shot up. Are you sure I looked at her, my daughter who'd found her voice beside mine? I smiled. I'm sure. She picked up her phone, pressed a few buttons, and just like that, the door Michael cracked open slammed shut again. Not out of anger, not out of spite, just finality. I didn't hate my son. I pitied him in a quiet, distant way. You pity a stranger stuck in the same bad story on repeat. But I couldn't afford to feed his mistakes anymore. I was busy feeding myself, feeding Anne, feeding hope to women who'd never tasted it. That night, as thunder rolled over Sarasota's sleepy streets, I lay awake and whispered a prayer not for Michael, not for Clara, but for every woman out there still apologizing for staying too long. May they find the door I found. May they close it without guilt. May they never look back. Some nights, when the sea breeze curls around our little balcony and Anne hums an old tune while stringing beads, I close my eyes and marvel at how quiet freedom sounds. Not silent? No. Silence is what choked me for decades. Freedom hums like a kettle on the stove, like laughter drifting down a hallway, like the gentle shuffle of slippers on a clean kitchen floor. You know no one will stain with cruelty again. I am not rich. My knees still ache. I still forget where I put my glasses, and sometimes I still dream of Michael as a little boy before his silence grew louder than his voice. But I am whole. Anne is healing too. Her shoulders no longer hunch when the phone rings. She sings while she cooks off-key sometimes, but always sweet. We sell enough bracelets and muffins to pay for our humble rent, our tea, and our laughter. Sometimes I find her standing at our fridge, tracing her finger over Lily's drawing. And every time she whispers, "Family means we don't hurt each other." She is rewriting what family means for herself. And I am so proud. Last week, I mailed a box of homemade cookies to Lily. No return address. Just a note inside to Lily from Grandma May. Keep drawing. Keep listening. You are already enough. It's strange. I spent my entire life trying to buy love with sacrifice. Turns out, real love costs nothing but honesty and the courage to walk away when it turns to poison. So if you listening to this now have ever been called dead weight, if someone has ever sighed when you entered the room or flinched at your mistakes, let me be your proof. You are not too much. You are not in the way. You are the warmth they lost when they mistook your kindness for weakness. Let them miss you when the house goes cold. Let them learn to pay for what you once covered with your tired hands and your too soft heart. And when they knock, because they will knock, remember you owe them nothing but the truth. The truth is, you were never dead weight. You were the foundation. You were the meal on the table, the warmth in the walls, the laughter in the hallway. When you left, you took the weather with you. And oh, how empty winter feels without you. Tonight I will sleep well. I will dream not of the past, but of tomorrow. Maybe a bigger kitchen, Maybe more muffins. Maybe one more letter from a stranger who says, "You made me brave." And maybe you hearing this now will pack your own small suitcase, close the door gently behind you, and step out into the sunrise you've deserved all along. Because some women don't break, they rebuild. And this time, they do it without permission.